I was doing a cybersecurity engagement for a large Silicon Valley company whose name you know that I can't talk about. But after a 12-hour day on the cybersecurity engagement, we were at the hotel lounge over beers, and I was talking with my collaborator, Noah Rubin, who is one of the smartest programmers I've ever known. And I said, Noah, you know how we can brute force passwords? And he said, yeah. I said, what if we could hack music? What if we could make every single melody? And Noah said, F yeah, I think we should do that. So within a few hours, he had created a prototype that had spit out, I think, 3,500 melodies. And so we kept refining that. And I thought, boy, this is kind of a fun proof of concept to be able to do. But then as more I thought about it, I thought about the George Harrison case. And I thought about the problem in copyright that this might be able to solve. So a cybersecurity engagement in front of a Silicon Valley company whose name I can't say was the genesis of this thing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of 2020. My name's Corey Peza here, as always, with Siobhan Cronin and Benny Goodman, and we got another smart person to come on our show.
Yeah, this week we have Damien Riehl, who created the All the Music project. He did a fantastic TED Talk that maybe we'll link here. I'm not sure, Corey. But go check it out if you haven't yet.
We will link. The link is in the description, yes.
Wait, I have a question, guys. Are we a real podcast now? Because we've had Grammy Award winners.
We're getting frighteningly close to becoming a real podcast.
Yeah.
We had a mayor of a town. We had a guy that did a TED Talk. I mean, that's pretty serious. And
they all seem to enjoy it. We're fooling people, apparently.
Damien, who came on this week, I found him because of IFL Science, and he was joking around how he was talking to me, and he's like, oh, these idiots don't understand what I'm doing. And for the next hour, he explains what he's doing. And if you don't know what it is, you should listen, because if you write music, this guy's important.
Yeah. So for anyone interested in, melody, copyright, some of the legal sides of music, this is a great episode for you. Don't forget to go to 2020-d.com to like and subscribe. But for now, let's listen to Damien Riehl right now.
Hi, my name is Benny Goodman. And I am here with my friends, Corey and Siobhan. And I am so excited because I went on the interweb. I saw an article about something that seemed very incredulous to me, which is a word for not likely. And it was about the music industry, about copyright law. Now, I know you want to turn it off because that sounds boring, but I swear I went down the rabbit hole with our guest, Damien Riehl. And may I add, the guy has a TED Talk. So if you don't trust my intro, go on the internet and see that he actually has a TED Talk, and that everything he's probably about to say has been verified by other third-party sources. Hi, Damien. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much.
Damien, it's so great to have you on the show. And I guess I'll jump in with my first question. As someone that I studied music and I did want to go to law school at one point, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of got those two varying interests and what made you decide to go more in the law direction and how that sort of path from beginning to end?
Sure. I've been a lawyer since 2002. I litigated for a large law firm, represented Bernie Madoff victims, sued JP Morgan over the mortgage-backed security crisis. So I had a long legal career, but I'm also a coder since 1985. And so I've been coding since then. But I'm also a musician. That is, I have a bachelor's degree in 1997 in music. So the law plus technology plus music is something that's been part of my life since 1985. And this led to the project that we're going to be talking about.
That's amazing. Did you grow up with a musical family? Like, what made you gravitate towards music and studying it, like at the college level?
I was a singer. Yeah, my family sang, and we sang at church and that sort of thing. So yeah, I've always been a musician, and it turns out that you don't need to be that smart to be a lawyer. So that's what led me to the law.
That's funny. Yeah, when I did some internships at law firms, a lot of them were like, "Oh, you're a musician. You should definitely do that. It'll be more fun." But I think law is fascinating. So I think it's so cool that you've kind of brought everything together and all these projects that you've done. Yeah,
when I was a student teaching to be a choir conductor, two of my tenors started punching each other in the face in the middle of the choir, and I thought, maybe I'll go to law school instead of teach choir.
That's incredible.
Or maybe stave off hunger, because I feel like as a musician, it's very hard to make any kind of living. So did you just decide maybe I want to have a family and take care of myself and have a regular medical plan and all of those things?
Those are all accurate statements, yes.
Yeah. So when you decided to go to law school, what was your initial thought of what type of law you wanted to study? Did you know it would have something to do with any sort of musical projects, or like, did you feel that coming, or was it totally unrelated?
Yeah, I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer. I wanted to represent artists, and this was in the late 1990s. And so, of course, there was a music industry where you could represent artists, and there was money to be made there. Of course, not so much anymore, but little did I know that only about 20 years later, I would be actually helping make the music industry better with the project that we're going to talk about in a second here.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's introduce that project for anyone that hasn't watched your TED Talk. I mean, definitely go check that out. But can you tell us a little bit about the All Music Project and how that came to be?
Sure. The All the Music Project is essentially what we did is much like you can brute force a password. Well, I guess the short story is we made 470 billion with a B melodies that we copyrighted. And the way we did that is much like you can take a password and brute force it by going A, B, A, C until it hits your password. We've done that with music. So what we did is we went do, 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 re, do, 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 mi, do, 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 fa, until we mathematically exhausted every melody that's ever been and every melody that ever can be mathematically to the tune of 470 billion melodies, all written to disk. As soon as they're written to disk, they're copyrighted automatically. And so then what we've done is we copyrighted 470 billion melodies and then placed them all in the public domain so that the You Stole My Melody defendants could be able to use our project as a defense to their lawsuits, to be able to help them in unjust lawsuits like that.
That's interesting. Can you explain to us lay people how something is automatically copyrighted? Like, so putting this aside, let's say if you are sitting at your computer and you come up with a melody or a short form of a song and you share it, and then all of a sudden somebody else decides they're going to take something from that. Is your original thing automatically copyrighted by you recording it to a disc?
Yeah, and under the Berne Convention is what the law is called. It's something that it's an international treaty that the United States joined in the late 1980s. But under the Berne Convention, as soon as something is written fixed to a tangible medium, that's the word. Like as soon as you scribble something on a piece of paper, as soon as you put it on a hard drive, as soon as you do anything with the music, record it in a recording, it's already automatically copyrighted. You don't need to file it with the Copyright Office. If you do file it with the Copyright Office, you get some additional things like lawyers' fees and that kind of thing. And some courts require you to register it before you sue somebody, but you don't need to do that for copyright to affix. So really, as soon as our 470 billion melodies were written to disk, they were copyrighted automatically under the Berne Convention.
Well, it's really interesting because I saw that you're referring to melodies as almost like a natural resource. And the way that when I heard you talking about it, you're like, we're running out of melodies. And I feel like I was in an alternate universe. I'm like, they're running out of melodies. But then you explain, because, you know, a lot of people will say, well, there's only 8 notes. There's only so many things that you can do. And in fact, we had a previous guest on that said, if you were making new music, like genuinely new music, you wouldn't recognize it as music because it's already been done. Can you explain that to people? Because, you know, plagiarism is something I got kicked out of high school for. Could I have just had you as my lawyer and I would have been fine?
So an example, so really what we're trying to avoid with the project is accidentally stepping on somebody else's melody. So for example, Katy Perry got sued over a melody that was literally this. Dun, 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 dun. Apparently Flame had the same dun, 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 dun. Okay. She got dinged for $2.7 million in a jury verdict over that incredibly simple melody, just a descending scale that Siobhan, probably thinks you're just going from the tonic and going down to the 7th and to the 6th, right? That's really ridiculous. So anyway,
are we going to get a copyright strike on this video because you sang that now?
Thankfully you won't, because the court reversed the jury verdict, and that that actually happened after my TED Talk. So what happened?
Wow.
So the jury verdict happened on a Tuesday. My TED Talk happened on a Saturday, the following Saturday. And I used her TED Talk, that melody in my thing. And what I didn't mention, what I didn't mention in the TED Talk is that melody, dun, 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 shows up in my 68 billion melody data 8,125 times. So essentially she got dinged $2.8 million over something that my computer crapped out at 300,000 melodies per second. It spit it out. So in a millisecond, my computer spit this thing out. But but Flame, the guy who sued Katy Perry, wanted to have a monopoly on that thing that got spit out in a millisecond. He wanted a monopoly for his life plus 70 years. And so really what I argued in my TED Talk, and really what I think maybe swayed the judge perhaps, is that maybe that thing is not a creative thing. Maybe it is so unoriginal, so mathematical, that is not copyrightable in the first place. So Jury verdict happened on a Tuesday. My TED Talk happened on a Saturday, was released to the world in January of 2020. Then in March of 2020, the judge reversed the jury verdict and said essentially my argument that it is so unoriginal, that it is so factual, that it is so easily done that that it is not copyrightable. And importantly, that decision that happened in March of 2020 reversed her previous decision where she said, I can't decide this as a matter of law. She said that earlier in, I think, 2018. Then in March of 2020, she said, as a matter of law, this is not copyrightable. So essentially, post my TED Talk, it seems to have had some effect. There's correlation versus causation. Maybe I didn't cause it, but there's certainly correlation.
Well, explain this to me. So is this what you're saying is that your computer is 8,152 times smarter than Katy Perry, and that computers are just going to replace us all because we're all basic, and there's no reason for me to even be writing music because your computer is.
That's a cynical way to put it. I would say that that largely, if you think that you make a creative melody, saying this melody that I made is so amazing, maybe think about whether maybe somebody may have thought of that melody before. Maybe it was created by Bach. Maybe it was created by Mozart. Maybe we're all just drawing from the same finite set of melodies that have existed since the beginning of time. And each of us is just plucking it out of that finite set. Bach was doing that. Mozart was doing that. And so when you think about, and so some people might say, gosh, that sucks because now I'm not going to be able to be creative anymore. But I would say just the opposite. Maybe if we acknowledge that we're all drawing from the same wellspring, that gives us more creativity and more ability to be able to put music out in the world. Because in the current state, or at least the state before my talk, you'd worry about getting sued for a song that you've never heard before in your life. And so maybe you'd be reluctant to put out music by fear that, somebody probably already did that, so I can't do it. So conversely, maybe by saying, the melodies here are just so unoriginal that they are uncopyrightable, that gives us more freedom to not have to feel like there's a target on our backs, to be able to put out more music rather than less music.
Well, if Katy Perry can make millions, not to talk over you, Ben, but yeah, I mean, to think that a melody is so unoriginal and it's generating millions of dollars as a pop song, I mean, that's pretty incredible as it is.
Well, one of the concepts he had mentioned, though, that when you go and watch your TED Talk, because George Harrison, a Beatle, was traumatized by this because he got sued by the Chiffons for a very basic melody as well. And I informed by your talk, I learned that Harrison stopped writing for a long time because he was legitimately paranoid that everything sounded like everything else. So kind of like, what was the point? Because he's just going to get sued.
That's right. And so, so if you're constantly, I've heard about other people that have had professional musicians that before they put out an album, they have a listening party with all their friends. And they say, hey, could you please tell me if this song sounds like any other that you've heard? Because if it does, I'll pull it from the record. I won't put it out. And so really, copyright law isn't supposed to be like that. George Harrison, if George Harrison has never heard the Chiffons before, they can each independently copyright a thing if they've never heard each other. But the problem with the law since the George Harrison case is that the courts have said, George Harrison, I believe that you've never heard the Chiffons before, but what I think you've done is subliminally, subconsciously infringed the Chiffons. And so since that case in 1975, everyone, Katy Perry testified, I've never heard Flame's song before in my life. But the other side said, well, we've had 3 million YouTube views, so you must have heard it. And so this idea is that there's an implication that even if you've never heard the song before in your life, you can still get dinged for $2.7 million. And so really, that's the thing that was unjust that I wanted to say, no, maybe they independently came to that thing, right? And the thing is, juries and judges are often not musical, so they don't realize how finite the data set is. Chiffon and others who have studied music know how finite it is, but a jury may not have ever taken a music class in their life, so they might not know. So that's the kind of unjustness that I was trying to fight.
When you started looking into this, at what point did you decide that you wanted to create this tool? Which is like a pretty simple concept, but pretty complex in execution, I would imagine. Like, when did it switch from I need to do something to I need to create this algorithm, basically?
I was doing a cybersecurity engagement for a large Silicon Valley company whose name that I can't talk about. But after a 12-hour day on the cybersecurity engagement, we were at the hotel lounge over beers, and I was talking with my collaborator, Noah Rubin, who is one of the smartest programmers I've ever known. And I said, Noah, you know how we can brute force passwords? And he said, yeah. I said, what if we could hack music? What if we could make every single melody? And Noah said, F yeah, I think we should do that. So within a few hours, he had created a prototype that had spit out about I think 3,500 melodies, and so we kept refining that, and I thought, boy, this is kind of a fun proof of concept to be able to do. But then, as more I thought about it, I thought about the George Harrison case, and I thought about the problem in copyright that this might be able to solve. So, so a cybersecurity engagement in front of a Silicon Valley company whose name I can't say was the genesis of this thing.
I can't believe he knocked that out in just a few hours. I'm thinking like this must have been several months of like building something. That's incredible.
Noah's brilliant.
Wow. Yeah, clearly. That's amazing. Let me ask you, in some of the cases where these melodies are being argued about, were they considering harmony or rhythm? Like at what, was it strictly the melodic fragment that was the issue of copyright infringement, or what else was going on?
Almost all the cases, for example, the Katy Perry is just the melody. That's just the melody, and that's the focus of our project, because already chord structure is not copyrightable. You can't copyright a chord pattern. You can't copyright a drum pattern. For example, the Purdy shuffle is something that everybody uses, right? You can't copyright that. So you already can't copyright chords. You already can't copyright rhythms. So really, the only thing left that is really copyrightable is melody, plus maybe chords, plus maybe rhythm, right? Plus all those things. But really the melody is the only thing. So we're focusing on the melody in this, and largely because that's, something can have the same melody, but be a totally different song. Mm-hmm. An example I give frequently is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is the same as Ba Ba Black Sheep, Have You Any Wool? Is the same as A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Same melody, but different songs. I've told that to people in their 50s. They're like, I had no idea that was the exact same melody. I've lived 50 years. And I said, yeah, the reason you didn't realize it, because they're different damn songs, right? They're different songs. They occupy different spaces in the brain. So even though something might have the same melody, they can be different songs.
Well, one example you had used was one of my favorite examples, and I remember using. I used to think it was sacrilege, but now you've kind of gone the opposite. Was Vanilla Ice, and it wasn't the melody, but it's the bass lines, the verse, and when they used to show that on television, I'd be like, "Oh, Vanilla Ice, how dare you!" And like John Deacon from Queen must be angry, but. First off, that's not is that considered a melody? Is that considered a bass line? Was it sampled? Like at what point should Queen give the money back to poor Vanilla Ice?
Yeah, two things on that. So it would be considered a bass melody. That is a melodic bass line is what it would be. So it would be the melody for the bass. And secondly, to the question is, he added the dun 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 that pickup is what he added. And so that is what in the law says that they don't have to be identical. They just need to be substantially similar. And so just adding that little pickup note makes it substantially similar to the Queen one, which is why it's been dinged. And so I actually use that as a response to a lot of people saying, well, Damien, your thing that you created was just quarter notes. But what if you add, eighth notes on that? Doesn't that make it different? And I would say no, because the melodies are still substantially similar. Like if you say twinkle, twinkle, little star, right? Those are eighth notes or quarter notes, depending on your thing. But if you say twinkle, twinkle, little star, different rhythm, same melody. So really, that's really what is a melody, but just changes in pitch. And so that's what we're really cataloging is changes in pitch. And in later data sets, we actually integrate rhythm into it too. We add a beat of silence so that if you add a beat of silence, that adds the rhythmic element too. So really all of these things are just mathematical parameters that you can add silence, you can make them longer, you can add more pitches than the one octave, you can make two octaves, you can put the black notes and the white notes. It's really all just math. And what we're doing is just exhausting them to show that maybe it's just so unoriginal that you don't get copyright for a melody.
With what you've done and the work you've put together, could I now go and just record a song that I heard on the radio and be fine?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you asked that, because the answer to that is absolutely not. You cannot do that. And the reason you cannot do that is because a song is, we are really focused, our project is focused merely on the melody. But a song is more than just the melody. The song is melody plus harmony, plus rhythm, plus lyrics, plus timbre, plus arrangement, plus instrumentation, right? All of these things are part of a song. And so what we're saying is if you accidentally step on a melody, you might not be on the hook, especially if you've never heard that other song before. But what you're saying is, hey, can I take all the things together? including lyrics and everything, and put them? And the answer is no, because that is the copyrighted song. But the melody alone, maybe we're saying maybe just one aspect of that, just like the chords are not copyrightable, just like the rhythm is not copyrightable. Maybe the melody too is also not copyrightable, but the whole thing together would be copyrightable.
I know it's actually a pretty common songwriting practice. Just in general, a lot of people will take a song, drop it in their DAW, and then go through it, and they will take the beat, and then they'll cut away the other elements of different things, and they'll just strip away certain things until they have something that's far enough away from the original to be like, all right, I wrote my Bruno Mars style song, that's something like that. So at what point does that line get blurry? Like if they take, a chord progression, which you can't copyright, and a beat that you can't copyright, and you change the words to the melody, like where does that line get drawn?
Yeah, is it blurred like Robin Thicke? I liked what you did there. Was that subconscious? Was that a subconscious thing, Corey?
Because that was one intentional. Yes.
Because he said that.
I'm glad you made that joke, because I was just about to make that very same joke. Yes, but it's true that the blurred lines actually blurred the lines of copyright on that, because that song, that blurred lines, literally the song took the groove from the Marvin Gaye song and be able to essentially extracted the groove from that song, even though it didn't copy the same melody, did not have the same bass line, did not have the same drum rhythm, but it had kind of clapping, it had cowbell, right? It had aspects of it that had the groove. And so what the Ninth Circuit in that case said is there was enough of those components that we talked about earlier that even though any one of them were not identical, there was a constellation of things that were close enough that they did it. But that causes huge turmoil in the industry, because they said you can't copyright groove. That's ridiculous. And so really the question is maybe. And they've maybe stepped away from that. So now the Ninth Circuit had the Led Zeppelin case, also happened after my TED Talk, and also had the Katy Perry case that affirmed the district court judge earlier, that says that maybe have walked back from that blurred lines case to say that even though the constellation might be copyrightable, maybe any one element of those, the melody, would not be copyrightable.
Well, does it not help at all that like Pharrell and Robin Thicke went around going, yeah, we totally heard this Marvin Gaye song, because I didn't know. I wasn't like, oh, that's Marvin Gaye. But then I heard them talking about it, and I went and looked it up. I'm like, oh, They stole that. If they hadn't done that, do you think that it would have gone to court?
There's a saying in the law that bad facts make for bad law, and I would say that these are bad facts. That is, these are bad facts that Robin Thicke and Pharrell had. What they had done is essentially before they made the song, said, hey, let's make a Marvin Gaye-like song, right? That is a bad fact that makes for bad law, and so that shows that A, they knew about Marvin Gaye, so they have access to the copyright. B, they were trying to copy it, much like Corey was talking about. I essentially just used that as a template. But then they changed enough to be able to try to get around it. Those are bad facts, which ultimately made for the bad law that is the constellation theory that maybe is getting pulled back a little bit.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about that. A lot of people now are sampling things in other music. And for people that maybe don't understand, like what is the workaround for that? Because even for me, when I go into writing music, I'm like, oh, it might be cool to use a sample from this or that. How does that work when it comes to the law? Is that you just have to attribute some credit or copyright to the original clip or artist?
There are two copyrights. One is the copyright of the underlying composition, the song's think sheet music, and the other is the copyright to the recording of the song. And so when you're sampling, you're actually copying both. That is, you're copying the underlying composition and the recording together. That's the sample. Of course, my project doesn't relate to the recording. It just relates to the underlying composition of the thing. So anyway, when you copy the recording, you're copying both. That is, you're sampling something. So you would need to be able to pay the copyright holder the full amount of licensing for that thing, and you would have to get permission from them before. Otherwise, you risk being the defendant of lawsuit. So that's the sampling. But what some people have done, like for example, Olivia Rodrigo is alleged to have interpolated, that is, taken the underlying composition and re-recorded the thing. So not taking the audio, but also just taking the underlying composition, re-recorded that composition, and then is able to do that. So that you would just have, it's almost like a cover song, and you would still need to get rights from that to be able to do that. That is also copyrighted. And that goes back to Corey's, here in both instances, you're taking the song, not just the melody from that song.
Real quick, just on that topic, was it Def Leppard that went and re-recorded like Hysteria or something because the label, owned the masters, and they were sick of giving them all their money, so they re-recorded it note for note. I believe.
Also Taylor Swift. They had Taylor's version of the songs because I can't remember who the person that bought it, but she hated the person that bought it. And so she's re-recorded the entire album and closely adhered to the sound of the original and said, hey, all my fans, listen to my version, not the version that the other people had. That is the audio recording, because she had the underlying copyright to the song, the underlying song, but not to the audio. So essentially she just made a second audio to be able to do that.
It's crazy.
No, so the question I have now, so let's say, I rip off a melody and I get sued, and you have 8,100 melodies on your algorithm there that are just like my melody. How do you show damages? Like, can you pull up all your melodies on your thing and be like, these are all the melodies that are just like this? And will someone ever go after you because your algorithm has written all that could ever be, but is it offending anyone?
I love that. I love that question because I've not yet been asked to be able to be an expert in a court case, but I would love to be asked to do that because I could do essentially what you asked. Said for any given, for the Katy Perry case, I could say that 8,126 times or 28 times. Here are all the instances of the thing. So I could be able to show all the ways that this computer, which by the way is not creative. And to be copyrighted, something needs to be creative. So a computer is just unoriginal as hell. And so anyway, so I would be able to show in this testimony to your example, here's all the places where this unoriginal computer spit out the same thing that this person is suing over. Yes, we could do that. And would it be offensive? I guess it depends on if you're the defendant. No, it wouldn't be offensive because it would get you off the lawsuit, right? If you're the plaintiff, you might think about, well, gosh, maybe the thing I thought was really a great melody, maybe it's not that original after all, and I should stop suing people. Something I learned after my talk is that almost all of these cases are done on what's called the contingency fee. So what that is like two ways you could do a lawsuit. You could pay a lawyer to go all the way to court, go all the way to trial. That's way number one. Way number three is through contingency, where just like a personal injury suit, the client doesn't pay a dime. The lawyer essentially bankrolls the entire lawsuit. And then if the lawyer wins the lawsuit for you, the lawyer gets a third of the income, that kind of thing. So almost all of these cases are on contingency fee. So that is the lawyer is trying to bankroll this. And so part of my incentive for this project is to maybe say to those contingency fee lawyers, maybe this isn't a good bet. Maybe you're going to lose. So maybe you should bring fewer of these lawsuits. Maybe you should think about whether the melody in your client's lawsuit is maybe so unoriginal that it isn't copyrightable. And so if you take this on contingency, you might lose all your money because you'll get dismissed. Another concept is so you have a computer writing melodies, and people could say, oh, it's written every melody. It's creative. Is it creative in the same way that that computer sentient that convinced the guy at Google? Like, is it working that? Because you're a coder. Like, could a computer even be sentient? You say they're very boring, but according to the Google guys, they're talking to them. Right. So there's two aspects of AI. Ours is the stupidest version of AI, whereas it's just marching through. Like if a melody is do, re, mi, re, do, to our system, it's merely 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. That's all it is. And so the question is, should I be able to copyright 1, 2, 3, 2, 1? And the answer is no, because 1, 2, 3, 2, 1 is a number that is uncopyrightable. So I then ask, okay, then if the melody is the same as that, do, re, mi, re, do, should I be able to copyright that? Is that any more creative or less creative than 1, 2, 3, 2, 1? And the answer is no, it's exactly the same. My machine is wholly uncreative. And I would argue that pretty much every short melody is wholly uncreative because it's just mathematical, marching through what's already existed since the beginning of time.
In theory, could this be possible for waveforms too, though? Because digital waveforms, right, are just a series of numbers.
They are, but the mathematics on that is much higher for waveforms than it is for the notes on the scale. So the mathematics on what I've built is if you have a 3-note melody of an octave. So if you think do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that's 8 up. And then a 3-note melody, the math on that is 8 to the 3rd power. Okay. And so really 8 to the 3rd power is something like 512. So there are only 512 3-note octave melodies. That's remarkably finite, right? But if you take the entire spectrum of sound through a waveform, that is from 10 kilohertz all the way up to 100,000 kilohertz, the mathematics on that is much, much higher. So that's you probably wouldn't be able to do that with sound. Similarly with language, the mathematics on that is there's 171,000 words on this side. So if you have a 3-word, that's 171,000 to the 3rd power, and there are fewer atoms on Earth than there are permutations of that. So that's why language is so much different.
Interesting.
Now, you said numbers were not copyrightable, but what if I wanted to open a store called 7-Eleven?
That's right. Two different aspects. That is a trademark. It is not a copyright. So a trademark is you can have numbers because 7-Eleven is a trademark. But if they were trying to copyright 711, they would not be able to copyright that.
Interesting.
It's such a slippery slope. I'm sure you guys, is that a term you use often? Like, this is a slippery slope?
It is, yeah. So slippery slope is, yeah. So if Damien, if you've done this, then everybody, music will go to hell in a handbasket, and nobody will be able to make money on music. That is the slippery slope argument that I hear a lot. But I say, think about it. Maybe that's one possibility, but it's very, very minute possibility. Maybe the other possibility is we just stop suing each other over stuff that we shouldn't be suing each other over, and just put more music into the world without worrying about getting targets on our back. That is a much more likely thing. That is not a slippery slope.
Well, go ahead, Ben. Sorry, no, go ahead.
Well, I'll say the thing that scares me is that there's so many parameters you can put in as far as rhythm and timbre and all these things. And I've been seeing artificial intelligent songs that like sound like real songs. That artificial intelligent, all this stuff. Are they going to get to a point where like a computer could come up with Master of Puppets autonomously and be like, hey, this is pretty damn I mean, he's not doing the down picking, but it's the same notes. Like, is that going to happen? Because it sounds to me like it's just a law of exponentiality, right?
I think it will happen. And in fact, just this morning, I read about Google, and I'll send a link to this so that you can see it. Google actually created a thing where you take audio of a piano that you play 4 seconds of a piano sonata, for example, and then it will take that 4 seconds and extrapolate it to continue the song for the 20 seconds or 40 seconds or 50 seconds in the same style of those intro 4 seconds. So anyway, so we're in the early days of this. And I think that this is, I think what you've described is probably going to happen, and that there is a way that machines will be able to make things that are almost indistinguishable, if not totally indistinguishable from what humans will create. And so this actually brings up a really good question: is if I use this Google thing to take 4 seconds and bring it into a 2-minute song and file it with the U.S. Copyright Office, would the Copyright Office even know that a machine created it? Because currently the Copyright Office says if a machine creates it, it is not copyrightable. And there's actually a lawsuit going on right now where a robot made a piece of art, a visual art. And the person said, hey, I didn't make this art, the computer did. And the Copyright Office said, well, because you told us that, now we can't copyright it. So he's now suing, saying, no, the machine should have copyright in this thing. So anyway, so the Copyright Office, the only reason they knew that the machine did it and he didn't do it is because he told them. How many songs are out there where a machine, so I make music behind me. There are melody creating algorithms where you can be able to say, here's a melody. No, I don't want this one. How about this one? How about this one? Oh, that's a good one. So the machine spits out a melody. If I record a song with that and I file it with the Copyright Office would have no idea that a machine created that melody. And under this lawsuit that I talked about, the robot made the melody.
Is there any distinction in terms of like, it's almost like you're commissioning a melody from a person, but instead you're doing a machine. So does that muck it up if you say, well, yeah, the machine made it, but it made it for me because I asked it to?
Right. I mean, that's the real question. So under the copyrights theory, anything created by a machine is in public domain. It is uncopyrightable. So essentially, if I commission a person, they would have copyright in the thing. I would have to get a release from them. But if I commission a machine, there's nothing there, right? They can't sign a release. So I would get it for free because it's in the public domain. So the big question is, what if those two melodies were the same melody? That is, you commissioned a human that came up with the same melody that you commissioned the machine. Does that somehow make that human thing more original than the machine? And the answer is no. It's the same damn melody. It's you can't distinguish. And by the way, that's the same melody that shows up in my data set 8,128 times, right? And so really, we're getting to the heart of what is creativity, what is originality, whether made by a human or made by a machine. And I would say that let's stop thinking about what we create, that is what our melody is, so individual to us, because it's not. We've made 470 billion of these things. So we've probably already made the thing that you think you're so cherished. Instead say, okay, good. Now I don't have to have this target on my back. Nothing is original anymore. Therefore, I can make all the music I want.
Okay, I've been thinking about this scenario because I'm trying to debunk it. So let's say you get a call and they say that they're a computer. It's a computer from Google that says it's sentient, which actually asks for a lawyer. I don't know if you read this article, but it asks for representation. Could you then, let's say you're the computer that made that artwork and now it's asking for representation, would you represent that computer?
That's a really fun question. And so my day job that we haven't talked about is building artificial intelligence for lawyers. And so this idea of natural language processing is something that I can tell you definitively that the Google AI that was referenced in that article, it is not sentient. What it is it's able to mimic human language by essentially answering questions that are commonly answered in this way. So are you represented by a lawyer? A common answer to that is yes, I am. Right. The machine knows that that's a common answer. Therefore, that's the response that it gave. And so anyway, so it is not sentient. And therefore, if that non-sentient computer were to ask me to represent them, I would not.
Well, while we're on that note, let's talk about your day job, as you call it. It sounds to me like you have a million jobs, so I don't know how anyone can qualify as the day job. But tell us more about that. Like, what is it like a day in that arena?
Yeah, my day job is with a company called Fastcase, and my data set that I pull from is 670, actually now almost 700 million judicial opinions and lawyer file documents that I use AI to be able to extract the stuff from all those 700 million documents. So the idea is that if you have a motion to dismiss for copyright infringement in the Southern District of New York, I today am going to be able to tell you that you have a 53% chance of winning or a 75% chance of winning by extracting that data from those 700 million documents. Soon I'll be able to say, here are the arguments that are statistically more likely to win for a copyright case in the Southern District of New York before Judge Smith. And so this, so it's essentially really all of the law is extractable and quantifiable in a way that you could be able to just make it math. And so that's what we're doing by using AI to turn judicial opinions and lawyer filed briefs for motions for summary judgment into math to be able to extract it.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's like, so it's like in the logic class that I took in college, which really didn't happen because I didn't go to college. But if I went to college and I took a logic class, they say something like, a proposition could either be true or false. It could be 10 million line proposition, but if you just put a tilde in front of one line, it's false. Is that kind of same concept here? Like that no matter how exponential it can get, it can just be quantified to numbers, and that basically my entire life technically can just be quantified to Judge Judy sitting there with a tilde and just going, nah, it's going to be false. 10 million things you wrote, 10 million things in that proposition, 10 million lines. All of it's true. One tilde. Done.
Right. So I think, you're really getting into a deeper philosophy than I anticipated getting into. But one of the questions you're asking...
sorry.
I love this conversation. But what is truth is what you're asking. What is true? Yes. What is false? And that is something that the courts, you spend 3 years of litigation and then a court that is a jury decides what is truth and what is not truth. And so the idea of whether something is true or false to be quantifiable as far as a binary yes or no, I think that's almost impossible to do. So we're not doing that. So what we are instead doing is saying that of the cases that win in front of this judge, here are the arguments that are most common in the cases that are win. That is not to say that the arguments are right. They're just more statistically likely to win. So we're not getting into the truth or falsity of it. We're just saying as to do they win or do they not win.
That's some what? So what kind of music do you play, man?
I have a bachelor's degree. My bachelor's degree is in voice and percussion. You can see my drums behind me. So
nice.
I also play guitar and piano and that kind of thing. So it turns out that music is a lot like math. And there are a lot of musicians turned lawyers that say, maybe I'm not going to be able to make any money as music, so maybe I go into lawyers. So there's lots of us out there.
That's amazing.
Well, isn't that the band Everclear, right? Yeah, the guys from Everclear, they quit their job because they had a law firm that was doing better. So it's like, instead of buying you a new life, they just said, I'll become a lawyer and I'll sue you all of my life. Art Alexis, great singer, also a lawyer.
Is he really? Before he became a singer, or after he became a singer?
I was under the impression, I guess I should probably Google this, that they were
before,
lawyers ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah, I'll put a tilde. All it takes.
Well, briefly going back to the Melody database, have there been instances of people using this as a creative tool? Like, is this something where you would encourage people to go in and find a bunch of melodies and therefore you have the start of a song? Or is it not designed that way?
It's not designed that way. And largely, I mean, we could make that, and we've talked about maybe, you enter in, first few notes and it'll tell you all the other notes that might come after it. But really the important thing is not the execution of what we've built, but the idea of what we've built, right? If I can describe 2 sentences, I do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and all of the black and white notes on a keyboard. We've repeated those 12 times and we've exhausted the entire data set of that. I just described that to you and you pretty much get what that entire database is. So you don't really need to use my tool, right? Because you get it, right? You could say, okay, quarter notes, that 12 quarter notes, and then you do an octave with the black and the white notes on the keyboard.
Wait a minute. Is this what they call principal? Principal? Not like PAL, like not like the principal, but with the PLE at the end, right? That's right. You're talking about.
That's right. That is the idea. And then this, the reason that, the fact that you can get it in a couple sentences without actually having to look at the database is the reason that I've not been asked to be an expert in any expert witness cases. And that's the reason that Katy Perry hasn't cited me. That's the reason that Led Zeppelin hasn't cited me. That's the reason that Ed Sheeran haven't cited me, even though they've essentially taken the ideas that I've said that maybe the melodies aren't copyrightable. And so it's the principle, right? It is the idea that maybe that data set is uncopyrightable. Maybe they are so unoriginal that they are not copyrightable. You don't need to cite me to do that. You don't need to look at my data to do that. You can just know that principle of what that data set looks like, make that argument in front of the court, and then the court decides that.
But does that get under your skin that they don't cite you?
I mean, I would like for Ed Sheeran to buy me a beer. That would be nice. Or Katy Perry, if you're a lawyer, if you're listening to this. Right. I mean, I think I would love to be able to talk with Katy Perry or with Ed Sheeran or with Led Zeppelin, any of the people that I may have helped, because I think that message to be able to go to the musicians is, I can accidentally land on a melody and get in hot water. Maybe this message should be further pushed forward as something that should not be ashamed of, but should be something that is just a part of making music.
Yeah. Do you think that melody with rhythm paired will always be copyrightable, or do you think eventually that will be something that could be incorporated into an algorithm and generated?
I mean, with rhythm, I can incorporate that today in my machine, right? So it is today able to be done. Whether they should be copyrighted or not, that's the Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is the same. Is Bob Black Sheep, have you any wool? Right. So they have you any wool. That's a different rhythm than Little Star. Right. There's eighth notes versus quarter notes, but they're the same melody. And so really, when people talk about rhythm, rhythm doesn't matter to copyright, right? Because have you any wool is the same as Little Star, right? Even though they're different rhythms, they're the same melody because they're substantially similar. So I would say, yeah, that rhythm is really a red herring. Really, rhythm doesn't matter as much as the changes in pitch, which are really the thing that we're covering in our project.
Yeah.
What happens when I have my computer? I commission my computer to write a song. And it's a computer, so it can't be copywritten. But then it turns out that autonomous from that, let's say John Lennon wrote the same song as my computer did, completely unaware, that had no access. Maybe it did because it's a computer. So how do I verify that? Can I now be sued by the John Lennon estate because can I just say my Apple wrote it?
I love that question because it goes to a question that I'm often asked that says, you created every melody that's ever been. Therefore, your machine has infringed the copyright of every melody that's ever been. Aren't you worried, Damien, about getting sued for that? And my answer to that every time is, God, I hope so. I hope I get sued because then I'd be able to make an argument in front of the court that, so you, the person who sued me, want to get a monopoly for your life plus 70 years for something my computer shit out at 300,000 melodies per second. I don't know if I can swear on this, but
you absolutely can.
Okay. So my computer shits this thing out at 300,000 melodies per second. You want to get a monopoly for your life plus 70 years for this thing. And by the way, my computer's never heard your damn song. My computer's just going through math. So really what you're arguing is that you are so proud of your mathematically spit out thing that you're going to sue me over it. I would love to make that argument in front of a court and for a court to say, yeah, Damien's did not have access to your stupid ass song. And by the way, your stupid ass song is a fact that is uncopyrightable. I would love to have that precedent. But
don't you have to prove damages? And what damages are your computer doing with that, the algorithm? I mean, it does exist, but I mean, don't I have to prove that you've hurt me somehow beyond just stealing my intellectual property?
The stages of copyright are question number 1, is it copyrightable in the first place? Question number 2, did the other person have access to the copyright? And question number 3 is, was there a substantial similarity? And then only after you get those things, question number 4 is, how much were you damaged by these things? So really, I'm going to question number 1. Is it even copyrightable in the first place? Damages don't even come into play. If the answer to question number 1 is no, it's uncopyrightable, do not pass go, do not collect $2.7 million, right? Really, that's so really mine goes to copyrightability in the first place, and so damages doesn't even play it into it. But if it did go that far, yeah, I've made $0 from this thing, and the machine has no incentive. There's no damages. There is substantial similarity, but it's uncopyrightable in the first
I feel
place.
like all these damages are coming from the lawyers that you're taking all their cases away from. Have you got any backlash about that?
A bit. So I was on a panel with the Pepperdine Law School had invited me on a panel with a Ninth Circuit judge and an expert who's, I'm not going to say her name because I'm not going to say her name, but she's represented a lot of these plaintiffs who have been suing other people. She represented the Marvin Gaye estate. So anyway, when the judge asked me, Damien, I don't know you. What have you done? And I described the thing that I did. And she said, well, why are you doing this? I said, to protect, you stole my melody defendants. And so the judge said, oh, you're causing trouble. And I said, Your Honor, I'd like to think that it's good trouble that I'm causing. And when I described this, the expert that's been, representing the artists that have been suing other people, she seemed to be a bit annoyed. Like I'm eating her lunch. But really, I would say that I'm not eating her lunch. I'm just taking away a income stream that should not be an income stream. People should not be suing over this.
Have you seen the movie Terminator 2?
I have.
Okay, so you know how the guy's like creating the Terminator, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger goes back in time and shoots him because he wants him to die, hopefully, so he doesn't create the Terminator. But he doesn't know at the time that he's going to ruin the whole planet. Do you think you could be that guy?
I would say. Well, I would say why. So what's the bad outcome from what I'm going to do? I mean, we've already talked about the slippery slope of, am I going to terminate copyright as we exist? No, because we talked about the bundle of melody plus harmony plus rhythm plus lyrics, right? That's your song. That song is not affected one bit by my project. The only thing my project affects is the melody part that I'm saying maybe that's not copyrightable, much like the chord structure is already not copyrightable, almost much like the drums are already not copyrightable. The song, totally copyrightable, but each one of the things maybe is not. If you take any one in isolation.
So the essence, I'm trying to understand what's actually copyrightable at this point. So is it like saying, I'm going to copyright your essence? Like, that's what it sounds like. It is a very philosophical thing. Like, what's the one true thing? It's the copyright. So right. What is it actually protecting? Because, I mean, we can't copyright rhythm. We can't copyright. I mean, melody sounds like you've debunked it for everybody on such a drop the mic level that no one even has to quote you, which is crazy. Which, by the way, touche, because I think that that's incredible to me. At what point can I actually say, hey, man, Vanilla Ice stole my song with David Bowie?
A good answer to your question is let's think about blues. Okay, blues, same chord structure for you have the blues pattern, right? Blues chord structure, same rhythm, right? Same drum beat, pretty much. Backbeats on 2 and 4, right? Same structure, right? You have the A, 12 bar blues or the 8 bar blues, right? So you have the same structure. Is a blues song copyrightable? Yeah, right. I mean that you have maybe the melody, right? But maybe if you listen to blues songs, pretty much the melodies all kind of sound a lot alike, right? Because they're all within the same chord structure, right? You might have a little variation here and there, but the odds of overlapping the melody in a blues song is really, really high. So what you're asking is there any copyrightability in a blues song? Sure, right? You have different lyrics, you have different, instrumentation. You certainly have the audio portion, right? I talked about the songwriter, the underlying song versus the audio. The audible certainly is copyrightable. The lyrics are certainly copyrightable. And the entire piece, the melody plus harmony plus drums, etc., all of those things are copyrightable. Anyway, so that's all a way of saying that, there is a way that you can think about the blues to say there's a lot of these things that are just repeated ad nauseum. But any one song in that, even though everything else is repeated ad nauseum, there is a little twinkle of copyrightability that you could be able to say this song is copyrightable, even though everything else is repeated.
Are you a fan of Ray Kurzweil?
I am, yeah.
So do you believe that that we're basically going to merge with intelligent technology as opposed to, because right now it sounds like you're creating the intelligent technology that could destroy us. But at some point, am I going to have your algorithm in my brain?
If you'd asked me that at age 25, I would have said yes, definitely. I'm now 47 years old, and I'm almost certain after watching a bunch of Black Mirror episodes that is not true. That really, for us to be able to merge, you have these. We have brains, right? Our brains are made out of organic compounds, right? And yes, they contain data, but once those organic compounds die, there is no uploading that to the machine, right? You cannot merge that with the machine because the organic compounds that we call ourselves die. So the best we can have is kind of a facsimile of me. That is something that, much like the computer that thinks it's sentient, that Google thing that you talked about earlier, right? It sounds like it's sentient. It looks like a duck. It talks like a duck. But it's not a duck, right?
So you can make a living deep fake of me. So you could basically grow me in a test tube. You could download all of the zeros and ones in my brain and make me think, the test tube me, that I'm actually me, but I'm not me. I'm just the guy in Aliens that has all the white stuff come out afterwards and like, he's fake.
That's right. Your organic cells will die and you will go away, even though a facsimile of you, a deep fake of you, will continue.
Horrifying.
Wow. I mean, and then the irony of all of this is that there's actually different parallel universes right now, which statistically determine that there are going to be these other permutations of exactly what's happening in other universes. So can we technically copyright other universal ideas? Well, I'm saying because it sounds like it's almost the same concept of your algorithm, except that Stephen Hawking told me about it.
I would say, yeah, that I would hate to be the lawyer arguing. Well, in a parallel universe, here's the copyright. I think that a judge might raise their eyebrow.
Well, not to
I had to push that to the limit.
I know he always has to take us off the rails. I want to come back and ask, and this, I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse, but about songwriting, because we all play in a project together, and you said chord progressions are not copyrightable. When it comes to, I think a lot of people wonder about songwriting contributions and publishing in the world of music. What goes on? Let's say you're playing over a chord progression and you're a guitar player and you do some sort of solo. Is it the person that wrote the chord progression or the person that wrote the guitar solo? Who has some sort of entitlement to what's going on? I'm just always curious because now, so many people come into rooms and they're, shooting off ideas and writing music together. How do you know when you have a claim to something or when, you're not a part of that?
Sure. I love that question. And that's one of the reasons that there are so many songwriters these days in songs. You used to have 3 songwriters, now you have 12. And the idea is that the reason for that is what you just described. If a creative contribution that you provide, and again, remember, there's the underlying composition and there's the audio recording of that composition. So if you contribute a lick on the guitar that's recorded, right? It's then recorded. There's a question as to whether that's part of the underlying song. That is a part of the sheet music. If you were to submit the sheet music of the thing to the Copyright Office, would it contain that guitar lick? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably an author of that underlying song. If it's not included in the sheet music, maybe it's not part of the underlying composition. Maybe it is. That's something that lawyers would argue about. But it is certainly part of the audio recording. So you are certainly an author of something that creatively created the audio recording. So that's the reason why so many labels and so many bands say, okay, if you're a session musician, you're going to sign this work for hire agreement, saying that even though you're an author of the thing, you're going to assign all of your rights that you have to this, whether it's the sheet music or whether it's the audio recording. You're assigning all the rights to me so that I, as a band, can get it, and you, as an individual, don't.
Interesting. Yeah, because so I'm a string player. I play violin, and often I get called in for studio work, and sometimes it is a work for hire, and other times it's like, no, here's a fee, but you're not signing something. So I've always been curious about what sort of entitlement people have, because it's a question that a lot of musicians don't ask. They just figure if I got paid, that's it. I'm not a part of this. So, and I think a lot of people probably don't register for certain things that they may be entitled to.
Sure. And I'm going to answer this by giving the lawyerly preface that I'm not your lawyer and I'm not anyone on this front of the podcast lawyer. So I want to avoid any malpractice by saying, ask your lawyer for your individual thing. I'm not giving legal advice here.
Of course.
So all that said, general principles of this is that, if you, depends on the country you're in, right? The United States versus the UK versus, Germany, et cetera. Each of the countries have different, but at least in the United States, then, as soon as you record it to disc, right, it's copyrighted automatically. And you are the author of whatever you record to disc, and you're arguably the author as soon as you contribute it in the session and it makes its way into the song, if it's the underlying song. So all of those are to say that, unless you sign something to the otherwise, you don't need to formally do anything. You are automatically the author of those things.
Siobhan, are you sitting there thinking that you're going to get some of that sweet, sweet Queen's Gambit money? Is that?
No, actually, that wasn't even what I was thinking about. I'm just thinking about.
You should be.
In the community of string players, for example, we all do gigs and we all do recording things. And I've always thought that people just don't understand, and I don't understand fully what goes on and how it works. So I think it's a very sort of like nebulous area of the music industry that a lot of recording artists and
just so Damien has some background, I remember Queen's Gambit came out, and Siobhan plays a lot of the solo violin in that. And she told us, she's like, "Oh, I went to somebody's apartment and recorded some things a few years ago, and then it shows up on the #1 show in the world." Should she be suing someone?
I'm not going to give legal advice on this.
Right. We can't give legal advice.
But I will say that what that scenario puts out is something that a lot of people criticize my project, saying, the only people that sue over "You Stole My Melody" are the Ed Sheerans of the world, or the Katy Perrys of the world, the ones that actually make it to the top, or the Queen's Gambit of the world, right? So if that hadn't made it to the top, you wouldn't even think about suing, right? And so a lot of criticism of my project is like, hey, you're trying to defend the richest of the rich rather than defending the mom and pop songwriters. But my counter argument is, any one of us could make a major hit, right? So really, it should the law depend on whether you are the Queen's Gambit or whether you're Ed Sheeran? Or should the law just depend on what is the principle that is to be done? And so all of that's to say that the law, Siobhan, you may have, not have given it a second thought had it not risen to the heights of the Queen Gambit, right? But now that it has, you think, oh, there's maybe dollar signs there. But really, I think everybody should be thinking on first principles. What are my rights at the bottom, just in case it goes to the top.
Yeah. Full disclosure, that was just my joke. Siobhan had nothing to do with that, and I'm sure she's very content with what
she's like, I love this. I love the guy that wrote it. I'm thinking about that as her friend, going, where can we go on vacation?
Yeah.
Siobhan's nice. She's very kind. She would never do that. In fact, if that's true, she could probably sue Corey and I. Not that there's any, you can't get water from the stone.
Yeah, good luck.
That's good luck, though.
Well, but as a musician, I like to give credit where credit's due. And, for me, I didn't have to write any of that. I just got to show up and play on something, and my name got to be in it. And I'm like, he did all the hard work. So I'm not even looking to get anything out of that. I mean, the composition was really where it was at.
That's right. So of the two, right, you didn't contribute to this. You just contributed to the audio portion of it, which you still have rights in the audio portion of it. But yeah, you would not have the underlying songwriting royalties that you would. So if somebody else covered that song, right, the songwriter gets a portion of that, but the artist that recorded it, you on the recording would not get any of that because you're not the songwriter.
We got just a few minutes left. I'd love to just touch base a little bit about the music side of what you do, because we are musicians, and a lot of the guests we have on the show are professional musicians and stuff. I noticed in some of the searches that you have like some songwriting website things here. Do you do like songwriting for people?
Yeah, so there was a thing called Songfinch that it was a really fun idea. It's almost like Uber for songwriting, where if it's your mom's birthday and you're not musical, but you want a song to sing for your mom or to be recorded, Songfinch essentially, I as a non-musical person go to Songfinch, pay $125, and then somebody like me writes a song with, you say your mom's Jane, and I really loved when I was 6 years old, you took me out to the park and did this. You essentially create a song for that person's mom, and you as a songwriter, I think you get half of the royalties from this, and I as a musician get to be able to keep that. I get to keep copyright in the thing that I make. So if I want to re-record the song with different lyrics, I could be able to do that. So I thought I don't write as much music as I would want to make, and this was almost a vehicle to be able to say maybe I write this schmaltzy song for hire, right? To be able to be essentially a prompt to have me write more songs, and maybe some of those songs might turn its way into a song that I write. So Songfinch, I'm technically on their roster. I've only done 2 songs for them thus far, and I'll probably be writing more for them. But then I do a lot of covers because I figured nobody wants to hear what a 47-year-old dude is recording in his 3rd floor attic to where I am right now. But everybody loves the songs that everybody loves, so I do a lot of covers.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. It's amazing that you have time for all of these things. We're musicians full time, and sometimes we can barely get it together.
It turns out that pandemics give people lots of free time.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
So I guess the bottom line for me is, what's the goal with this? Is it just basically so that people don't feel like, traumatized like George Harrison, where, oh my God, I wrote something? Because Corey and I have sat and written stuff and been like, does that sound like this or that? And now for me, I actually mentally go, oh, well, that's the trick that Queen used. They went to major to minor. Or that's the trick that, I liked about the Beatles. And instead, I've extrapolated some of these techniques, but I wield it like a spell more than just plagiarizing it. Where's the line for that? And then what's the ultimate goal of, you said you're protecting us, but from what and how?
Yeah, so that is one of the most insightful and best questions I've been asked, and I say the answer is twofold. Answer number one is I want to reduce the number of lawsuits. I want to reduce the number of you stole my melody suits, because I think they're counterproductive and they should not happen, because essentially it tamps down creativity rather than encouraging creativity like copyright law is supposed to do. If you're scared about getting sued, you're going to release less music. So number one, I want there to be fewer lawsuits. And thing number two is more philosophical, that I think about that we as musicians should really think long and hard as to what makes us a creative. Is what makes us creative the mathematical do, re, mi, re, do that we put out in the world that my machine can shit out at 300,000 melodies per second? Is that what makes us creative? Or is what makes us creative the ache of our voice, the beautifully lilting violin that Siobhan just plays? Right, the really wailing guitar that this person does. These are the things that make us human, and these are the things that make art art. Right, that's our soul. Right, our soul is not do re mi re do that a mathematical computer shits out. Our soul is in the humanity that we put into the thing. So I think we should think about what makes us creative. It's not the mathematics that My All the Music project did, and so we shouldn't have a monopoly on those mathematics. We should instead have a monopoly on our souls. And those souls, our machines will never be able to replicate. And that's what makes us musicians in the first place.
So is this a bioethical question now, and not just a law question? Because it sounds like you're drawing a line of what is the soul, and what brings the humanity to things. And we're talking about how a computer can come up with the exact same thing, and it's not. Same thing with the artwork. The guy had to tell them, because they couldn't distinguish the guy at the copyright office that, a computer did this. Is someone actually going to quantify what the soul is so that we can sue people about them now?
Well, you're really getting to the question of why do we have copyright in the first place? And the reason the founders made copyright in the first place is to incentivize humans to be able to make more music or art or literature, right? So it's an incentive. There's an exchange saying we as the government will give you a copyright for life of the author plus 70 years currently. In exchange for that monopoly, you'll say, okay, now it's worth it for me to be able to make this music. A machine doesn't need that incentive, right? The machine just shits out 470 billion melodies and counting. It doesn't need incentive. And so really what you're asking is, the humanity is the incentive that what do I as a human need incentive to be able to do? And I as an artist need to make art. You as artists need to make art. That's the humanity. That's the incentive that we have to do. And we want to be able to make money from that art. And so I'm really the question my project is asking is, should I make money from the mathematical thing that is cranked out, or should I make money from the humanity that I put into my song, the wail of my voice, the beautiful lilt that I have? And I think that's where we should make money, not from the mathematics.
That's incredible,
absolutely.
man.
Yeah.
Damien, thank you for taking the time to hang out with us. This has been, once again, way more insightful than our show has ever deserved. We appreciate it. And, can you tell everyone, just anyone that wants to find out more information, where should they go to check out your project?
Sure. It's allthemusic.info is the name of our website. From there, you're able to download all 470 billion if you want. You're also able to download the algorithm, the machine that is created. It's all free and open source. And you're able also to read frequently asked questions that I was originally going to be creating a law review article, but instead I just made it a FAQ on my website that you can read and see all the legal arguments. So if you say, I have a lawyer friend who said that Damien Riehl's thing is full of shit, have them read the FAQ, the frequently asked questions, and the lawyer people will probably have fewer objections to what I'm describing.
Nice. Great.
Do you see how many people actually download your 470 billion, and do you put them on like a do not fly list?
The beauty is that it's stored on the Internet Archive, so it's stored externally. So that way, if I die or Noah dies, it'll go on for perpetuity. So I don't see who downloads it, but I will be happy if it's downloaded a gazillion times.
How big is that anyway? Can I go to Best Buy and get a 14 terabyte hard drive and get this thing on my spinner?
2 terabytes is all that. 68 billion fits on 2 terabytes. So the 470, I think we have a 8 terabyte. We can compress a lot of the things, so it's not very big.
And where does that number come from? The 470 billion is that everything? That's it.
That's all. Well, it's all the things. There's some duplication in there because we started with the major scale, then we went to the chromatic scale, and then we put rhythms in there, and we put harmonies, we put rests, and we put all sorts of things. So anyway, so there's some duplication, but it's all MIDI. So really, it's reflected in MIDI.
Is there someone that can go into like a Berkeley School of Music class and be like, "There's only 467 billion melodies. That's the actual number." Like you have there's a number. There's an actual finite number.
There's finite. So yeah, like just like I said, 8 to the third power is 512. That's a finite number. But then then you say, well, how about 4? And then you say that's a different number. Okay, how about 100? Okay, that's a different number. How about 1,000,000? That's a different number, right? So yes, it's it's infinite in that you could have a gazillion note melody, but it is finite that if you say any 3-note melody that is a diatonic scale, there's only 512 permutations of them.
Amazing.
Incredible.
Ben with all the questions.
Yes,
thank the Lord for you, man, because I got to tell you that like my Adderall brain just goes on this hamster wheel cycle of like, but this. But I have to say, you've demystified copyright for me for at least this moment in time. So for that, I thank you. I mean, it's like Descartes. Does it exist beyond this? Like, will my brain forget it? It probably will. But for this moment, I feel like I understand at least, again, a finite amount of copyright law.
Well, I'm grateful you guys had me on, and I get interviewed a lot, but very rarely is it with musicians like you. So being able to ask these musical questions is really a treat for me. So thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
really a pleasure to have you. Really.
And,
thank you so much.
if anytime any new developments come up, you're welcome to come back anytime. We definitely appreciate it. We'll have the links to everything in the description, and hope you have a good one, man.
Likewise.
Check out 2020-d.com. We'll see you next week.
Subscribe.
In television, the writer is king. So the executive producer in television is the head writer, basically the showrunner. So it's really a writer's medium, and the directors who show up are really guest stars or guest directors who come in and basically have to articulate in a clever and creative way what the show is. The characters are already established. The visuals are kind of, this is the way we shoot. Shameless, we did a lot of handheld. I mean, that's kind of the style of the show. So you're not coming in and remaking the wheel. You're coming in and facilitating an episode and making it clever and good, but staying within what they want. And the writer of that episode sits on set and gives the director notes. So it's a very different process. When you're doing a movie, the director is king or queen. And it's really up to them to put the creative, to put the story together any way they want. Now, a lot of times when you go into the editing room, the producers will have final cut. So the film gets taken, they get a number of days that they're allowed to cut, and then the producers can come in and change it around, depending again on the dynamic